Hello. It's been a minute since I've done a little podcast. I've actually been thinking about pulling the plug on the audio podcast and just doing the YouTube video, but I'm conflicted about it because I just love audio so much, pure audio recordings. So I don't know, we'll see. But I might switch to just a YouTube because I haven't been using it that much, obviously. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit today with my own chart and what's been going on. Let's have this little joke here. So somebody walks into a bar and the astrologer's like, okay, hold up. Is it Saturn or is it Neptune? Yeah, it's really bad. Okay. I've got a little list of things, and I guess I'll go in order. This is kind of just like I've been making a list of things that I've been thinking about related to astrology. One of them that's not on the list is how, I don't know, I guess I feel a little like inundated with the world. So if you're listening to this, I mean, you probably, it's like, what are we drawn to? What are we attracted to? It's all energetic resonance, and you have something of value for the world. When you share, there's going to be a few people out there, maybe a ton, that are really thankful for what you're sharing about your personal experience. So I just wanted to say that because, it's easy for anyone, it's easy for me personally to discount the value of what I have to share and actually kind of go, like not want to share at all and just disappear from the world for the rest of this lifetime. Feel that. And I'll talk about my astrology on that in a little bit. But, like I get online and it's just like, it's funny because like sometimes I'm just like, it's so annoying. Like, okay, yeah, like another this, another that, another, like it doesn't hit unless it's the right time in a certain way. And so like when we're just like constantly fed a stream of whatever, it just kind of becomes meaningless. We'll talk about that later too, relative to astrology right now. Also, I've got Hermes behind me. We might talk about Hermes, Mercury, Gemini. And then on my other side, I've got Neem, Karoli, Baba. I don't know if I've shared this in the past, but I'm a devotee of Neem, Karoli, Baba. So, and I've got a little story there today to share. One of the things I wanted to talk about, so it's, am I thankful that anybody out there is even going to watch this or listen to me? I mean, I'm thankful that anybody does what truly resonates for them as what they want to do in life. So, I'm honored if this is something that does feed you or nourish you in some way and you get something out of this. Yeah. So, thanks for being you in the world and being out there. I know it's not easy. Speaking of not easy, I was recently talking with Steve Wolfson, and he made a comment about, like the caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly, and in evolutionary astrology, of course, this metamorphosis. You know, we talk about Pluto and this process of metamorphosis. And I think I've stressed this numerous times. I thought it was one of the really fascinating teachings of Jeffrey Wolf Green to distinguish between Uranus as transformation and Pluto as metamorphosis. So when you're in this Plutonic process, you're going to come out the other side different. Like there's no way that you can remain who you were. Pluto's actually stationed this morning on my sun within some minutes. I might talk about that too in my personal story, but this metamorphosis, right? And but Steve was pointing out, and he's like, but you know, he's like, hasn't talked about, or just like, I don't know how he put it, but he just kind of brought up how the process of being in the cocoon isn't all like cozy, like, oh, I'm in a cocoon. You know, it's you've just lost your entire previous body and you've turned to goo. Like, this is a very challenging process, and you don't know that you're going to become a butterfly and fly out of here and be like, woo. So the cocoon process, and I think that like relative to Pluto transits, for some people it's a whole Pluto lifetime. You don't know during the transit what you're going to come out on the other side as. I was going to say, like in the USA's chart right now, Pluto is going to be coming up on our south node. It's like the moon, the south node of the moon, right? Like those things correlate to the public in a mundane chart, in a nation's chart. And so as a people, myself later living in the United States, like we don't really know where we're going to come out of on the other side of this transit. Like we just know that we're in it. And people are having Pluto transits on a very personal level every day. And there can be fear related to not knowing where you're going to come out. But yeah, I was listening also the caterpillar, cocoon, butterfly, that same reference that Steve mentioned. There's this hip-hop artist, Matre, Matre, part of the Los Angeles independent underground scene, adjacent to the Shapeshifters and the whole Project Blowed scene. But he has a whole, he has a really great, super inspiring hip-hop album called Easter Sunday, Sonday. And it's got really beautiful messages in there. So I really appreciate Matt Dre. But on one of them, he's talking about the cocoon also, you know, like how hard that part of the process is. Yeah, that's real. Yeah, I have been having a hard time recently, a bit, and just kind of things have come up, kind of related to, my Chiron return, and so, yeah, I'm like I'm like, I don't know, 3 degrees, I'm 3 degrees away from my exact Chiron return, but big but here is like Chiron is at the exact same degree of in my progressed chart, my south node and my Venus, my progressed Venus is stationing on my Aries south node, so it's like this 20-year conjunction of Venus and my south node Aries. It's pretty interesting because it's, you know, like a 20-day thing in real life with this Venus station, and so it's ends up being this huge massive chapter of my life, Venus stationing on my Aries south node in the second house, Venus being the ruler of the Libra north node, so it's kind of a extra funny paradox in a sense. And that south node in the second house especially, and in Aries, the combination of those things, I've always kind of noticed this profound inner gravity to be alone and retreat. If you have a south node in the second house, or you have Pluto in the second house, and you understand the astrology of this, you'll know that this is an important natural process and cycle. Like, this is essential. It's kind of in the same way that Taurus as a polarity is essential to Scorpio evolution. How does evolution evolve? You have to do a Taurus polarity too. Like, you need time to come back to yourself and to, reestablish who you are after the intense evolution. If it's just all evolution all the time, you're going to kind of lose it. So you need the Taurus polarity. I think, like, when I got into evolutionary astrology, I thought that for a while, like, I was so focused on, okay, I got to do the polarity to my Pluto, and I've got to do the North Node, and yeah, these are definitely things to look at to see if they're playing out or manifesting, but it doesn't mean that, like, don't do your Pluto, don't ever do your South Node. Like, that's like separating a part of yourself from yourself, or from, it's like pretending like you don't have your soul's desires. So those are going to manifest, but everything, when the polarity is integrated, it manifests in a healthier way. So, like, having a south node in Aries in the second house, and if I, like, never went out and did Libra north node in the 8th, I never really shared deeply with other people, maybe I wouldn't ever really be doing my north node, yeah, and speaking of which, as much as I felt like I had no desire to record and put anything out today, I kept feeling this kind of nudge, or this call, or, like, part of me wanted to, and I was just like, why? And one of the things that I do sometimes with astrology is I run what I call the Composite NOW. Maybe you've heard me talk about this. I'd like to think that it'll become popular one day. I convinced Nicholas Sparkles of Gold one time. I don't know if we were on a phone call or texting, but I was just, like, hitting him up with all of these Composite NOW things that he had going, and it's fascinating. It's interesting because it's like the idea is, you take a moment in time that's pretty potent or pertinent, or just like, what is going on, and you feel these currents, and you're just kind of like, what is up with today? And maybe you've got some transits that you're thinking about, but you're also just like, what the fuck? Oh, excuse me, I swore on here. Okay, it's not for kids. And you save the chart for now. I just call it, like, now. I have like a whole bunch of charts called now that I save. Sometimes I edit them. And then you run a composite chart with your natal chart with the now chart. Yep. And then usually what I'll do with that is I will look at hits to my natal chart, or key points that I have activated. And so you could do that by then doing a bi-wheel and putting the Composite NOW around your natal chart, once you've created that. I know it's kind of, if you're a beginning astrologer, it's probably, like, a bit much and kind of heady thing to do. Like I often say, like, I just look for the greatest hits. And one of the things that jumped out when I ran that this morning was, in my Composite NOW, Mars was in Libra on my North Node. And so I was just like, yeah, there it is. I just keep feeling this pull, this my relationship to the moment was like, oh yeah, it's time to share something. I'm not on a schedule with these things. And that's just kind of how I roll. I don't have a fancy intro. I don't have, like, I was thinking about that. It's like I grew up really getting into punk rock, and I've always loved, like, they were all original cuts. And today's, you know, so refined and polished, and so many people are, you know, got things all like pretty and fancy, and, you know, this is just me getting on here. But that's kind of how I like it. I like, you know, like a one take, like, this is how it is. Like, I didn't edit something out because my cat's meowing downstairs, or, you know, she's not allowed up here. This is cat free zone. Sorry, mystery. Yeah, so Chiron is at the same degree as my progressed south node Venus station. So it is this paradox of, you know, doing a Libra north node, deeply sharing, but then going back into this Chiron south node. And so one of my very personal shares that I'll share today with that is, I had a counseling, therapy, healing session. I don't even know what we call it. But I had, what was it? 3 years ago, I think I quit coffee and marijuana completely. And more recently in my life, I have my 3/4 of a teaspoon instant Mount Hagen's little coffee in the morning. And that's been working fine because it's very consistent. It's on the timing and the dosage. And I feel like I can maintain Libra balance and harmony with my body and my being with that. And then occasionally I would have some marijuana when I was sick, and like just take a bath and like zone out and just be by myself. And so, yeah, I don't use it as much these days at all, but I've been kind of like here and there a little bit more with it. And so I went into this counseling session and just kind of like realizing that I've always had this really deep like guilt and shame around using it. And I talked about how I always felt like I was like failing in some way, like failing in life by having any marijuana in my life. And we got into that, and I wasn't thinking about this whole Chiron thing, but then the next day I was like, what the hell am I going through? And I looked, and yeah, there was Chiron on my south node Venus, and I was like, oh yeah, wow. Because one of the things that she was like, yeah, when you were, you know, like 17, you know, and you started this process, you know, there was very much like this kind of like, described it as kind of between the heart chakra and the solar plexus, like in the back, this just kind of like emptiness. And I feel that. I still feel that, you know, and I think that's part of why I put, like, for me, Neem Karoli Baba is like kind of like the only thing that I found that is that path that fills that void. Everything else is temporary, and I know that. But still, like, we're just like, I mean, how many of us are constantly like compulsively doing some temporary, you know, satiation salve for this deeper emptiness? It's just on the daily, you know, like, maybe not for some people, and for those people, I thank you for, you know, being in the world with that level of energy and intention and prayer. We definitely need that in the world, you know. And it's like, we don't have to beat ourselves up for quote unquote, you know, not living at this level of amazingness. And I think like part of my lesson is I was just watching a show, and actually really interesting timing that this came up in the show, but it was basically like saying, it was these women talking and saying like, yeah, men, oh yeah, all men have secrets, and they keep them to themselves, and sometimes it's better that way or something, or like, it was really funny exploration of like this idea that, and in the show, the lead male character ended up having like his most painful thing revealed. He grew up without parents, and then his dad had just like shown up out of the blue, and the woman that he was seeing had like wanted to like secretly meet with him, and his dad behind, anyway, it was like this whole thing. And then like he found out and just like brought up all of his deepest emotional pain around that, which, you know, like it was a secret, you know, like it wasn't like, hey, guess what, I'm sharing my deepest emotional pain with you. And like there's like a level of sharing, I think, I don't know, everyone's different, but you know, there's this like protected level. Like I can think of my grandpa was in World War II, and he never told stories of World War II. I was just reading this morning, like 51 million people died in World War II. You know, he doesn't talk about World War II. Get it? You know, but it's important to talk about it, you know. It was coming up too in another article with, you know, Germany declaring the AFD radical group, you know. So, yeah, we all have, you know, we all have these places, of course. And so that's been coming up for me a lot. My relationship to this really deep place of pain that, you know, like I've looked my whole life for, you know, some relief from it, you know. And so, yeah, I've really been face to face with that. It was like, oh yeah, Chiron return. I have Chiron conjunct my south node, so it's been an interesting process. I don't even know. I'm losing it. You know, I think like if you have south node stuff, I would say that, you know, something that comes up like for me, what's the point of doing this, you know? We have these deep wounds, but like I said in the beginning, you know, what you have to share is still valuable when you do it authentically as who you are and where you are, and you're not trying to be somewhere else or be somebody different. Just show up as yourself, and it's the most beautiful thing. Okay. Oh wow. Well, I never cried on here before. Okay, well. Just take a minute. I want to talk a little bit in a minute about South Node Chiron. South Node in Virgo. Everyone's having a South Node Virgo thing because it's transiting. But I was gonna, before I get into that, I was gonna share. Well, I had a lot of different health crises come up with the eclipse in the Virgo. That Virgo South Node getting activated by that Virgo full moon Pisces eclipse. Of course, it was like my moon's like 23 Pisces and some, so of course. But, and you know, Saturn, teeth. Saturn rules teeth, right? Venus rules beauty. Saturn and Venus kind of together, I think, correlate to skin, right? And beauty. But yeah, I had a bunch of teeth stuff come up. I had my coronation and a double crowning and another filling, and I've had so many teeth problems. And so if you've had any teeth problems like me, and I was like, how come I just keep having bad teeth stuff over and over and over and over? And it turns out that, well, I had a coworker friend sent me this Huberman Lab podcast where he has a guest dentist, and she was amazing. It's 3-hour podcast. They go through everything, including rectal ozone, which I'd never heard of before. I was like, wow, we are halfway through this thing and we're talking about rectal ozone. What the heck? But here's what I learned about my teeth problems. So if you don't know this already, gosh, there was so much good stuff in there, but mainly I changed things in my life. So one of the big things, and this is very like Saturn crossing my Pisces, Venus and Moon, which I kind of have always joked about as like, like give me like nectar of the gods as an IV, like I just want to be like pleasure and no pain or something, but that's not life. And so in relation to that, at a very core level, I've always just kind of like nibbled and sipped a lot consistently. And what I learned from that podcast was that I was basically like, every time you have anything put in your mouth that's not water, the pH kind of like tanks the pH of your mouth for at least a half hour. And so in that environment, that's when decay and cavities can really start to do their work. So basically, I was kind of like perpetually keeping my mouth in a pH because, I work at a food store. And before that, I worked at a cafe, just kind of like constantly surrounded by like samples and free food and that compulsive habit of like, what can I have now to feel better? Even though like I'm like thinking that like I'm over all this stuff, but like seeing how deep it is in my daily habits and having a reason now to change how I eat. I was like, am I drinking my tea too slow? Should I have finished this already? Because I'm extending my thing. But there's only so much I can do. I'll do my best. But so yeah, so then having like bigger gaps where there's nothing going in except just water, 3-4 hours if I can. Especially of course that nighttime period, and a good flossing. I'll do a floss first, then a water pick, and then a toothbrushing. And then now my toothbrushing is exactly 2 minutes, and I switched to the nano hydroxypeptide, or I don't know, it's something like that. It's like this, it's a nano level hydroxypeptide. It's all over the place now, sort of, but the idea is that that toothpaste, if you haven't heard about it, does help like with at a very core level, remineralization and strengthening of the teeth. So yeah, I have some hope, even though I've had a gazillion teeth problems. But anyway, if you didn't know it, that was new to me. Like when the first couple years ago, someone mentioned some kind of like that toothpaste, and I was freaked out. And I was like, I don't know if I'll put any nano stuff in my mouth. But this had a lot of really solid scientific understanding, research, and background to the situation. And I'm doing that. Yeah. So end of the Neptune and Pisces end, and especially with Saturn and Pisces, I just want to say, I mean, yeah, we're in Neptune and Aries. I guess we'll have a little revisit, but it just felt to me so much surrender. It was just like, what can we do right now but surrender to this moment, as almost like where life can be like so overwhelming, where you're just like, you just have to accept this, not to not take action, not to stand up and live with integrity for what we believe in, but like there's also this kind of profound, like, I have to just accept that this is what is happening right now, you know. And to not do that was just like, it was just so, it was kind of like, what else could you do? It got so ridiculous on some kind of personal levels. I think, like I was saying, that eclipse brought, I think, a lot of people into some personal crises. You kind of get to that place where you're like, okay, I guess this is happening. I'm just gonna work with this. Yeah. But it made me realize too that, you know, Virgo in evolutionary astrology and sixth house, without the polarity of Pisces, you know, correlates to a sense of inner emptiness, life devoid of life, you know, going through, you know what I'm saying? And so I realized that while we have the South Node of Virgo transiting, South Node transiting Virgo, that's what I'm trying to say. While we have this, collectively, we, you know, each time, especially, you know, with the eclipse and when it gets triggered, what I realized is like, wow, we are reliving this relationship to having a certain crises in our lives with an inner emptiness. Like this, I think, you know, like a lot of us are encountering this, like, wow, here's this part of myself that is just like, you know, I don't know what to do with this emptiness. Like, I think acknowledging it and just being really real about it is one thing. And remembering that there are lots of things in life that do nurture us and feed us. And somebody was, I think, I was having a conversation with a friend, and I don't know what brought it up. If it was like a Saturn in the sixth house, Saturn in Virgo, South Node Virgo. Anyway, got into a Virgo thing, and I was like, and so I was just like, yeah, I think, you know, it's interesting because Neem Karoli Baba basically said, like, that's, I came during the Kali Yuga because this was the number one message that people needed, to be reminded of, to love everyone, to remember God, and to serve others. Love, serve, remember. That's the name of the, you know, Ram Dass Foundation. That that's the core of that message. Neem Karoli Baba didn't like have writings and teachings in that way. It was just like taught in a different way, teaches in a different way today. But and so yeah, with this we're technically in the Virgo sub age of this Pisces age, and so having this Virgo South Node, I think we're experiencing on individual levels, and I don't know how much people are talking about it because I'm not that like outwardly like absorbing everything, but I think there's a lot of crises going on individually. You know, with Virgo overwhelm, are we overworking ourselves by attempting to just keep going, and then having imbalances and health issues come up, and then the crises of how do we cover this? You know, there's just so many ways that the Virgo crises can manifest in a time like this, under conditions of extreme inequality and injustice in the world, especially like resource injustice and inequality. Yeah, so, and then just random weird health crises. I've heard a lot of stories and had like some weird stuff come up like right on that Virgo full moon. I had a sty on my eye. I've never had a sty on my eye. And then I had a coworker who had a sty on their eye, and I ran into people in the store. They're like, "Oh yeah, I know this. My friend in Seattle had that happen too." I'm like, "Just happened?" They're like, "Oh yeah." I was like, "That's so weird. I'm like, why is this happening?" And then they're like, "Oh yeah, and my son has this randomly like big red spot on his neck that we don't know what it is." And so, and then I've had other reports come in. I think, you know, back to like keeping secrets. Like there's certain things like we're not like, "Oh, by the way, this is happening to me." You know, it's just like you're passing somebody that you don't know so well, and you're like, "Ah, good. How's it going? Good, good." Like, yeah, I'm in 5 seconds. I'm not gonna tell you what's going on with my life. I just need to get through the day here. Good to see you too. But when I was in the Redwoods, went with my love to the Redwoods and had a really sweet trip. Had 3 days off. I was very thankful for that. And I was walking through the woods. I had come back into my consciousness something that I had been struggling with for a long time. So this is a little bit of an obscure, big picture, metaphysical, spiritual, astrological insight. So I don't know how this will be of interest to anybody at all, but anyway, I'll tell this little story and then I've got just a couple more notes. But yeah, when I read that Neem Karoli Baba came during the Kali Yuga, because that was when humanity most needed that message, because I am, you know, evolutionary astrology nerd, and I was like, well, you know, the ascending Kali Yuga technically ended according to Swami Shri Yukteswar's Yuga cycle, which EA people, you know, have mostly been using that one. You know, that ended in 1500, right, 1500 AD. Yeah, and you know, and the descending Kali Yuga began in like, I don't know, like the 8th century BCE or something. You know, something around there. And so, so I was thinking, I was like, yeah, but like the Kali Yuga is technically over, and Swami Shri Yukteswar is considered an incarnation of wisdom. I mean, we're talking about a soul who, you know, remanifested in physical form after left his body. You know, like this is like, so like how could, and but then like Neem Karoli Baba is like my guru, and you know, like kind of like basically like, as we understand it, an incarnation of Hanuman. And so I was like, okay, like, but this doesn't make sense. But then, so I was on this walk, and I was thinking about it, and because I brought my copy of Miracle of Love, and I had been reading in it some different stories where just like these little snippets of where devotees had come and been like, "You look the same as when I was a little girl and I saw you and da 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 da, like 70 years ago. How can this be?" And then he would be like, "Shut up. I was born again in the hills. Stop talking." And then there's like all these stories of, you know, and then every now and then there's this story where it'd be like, he was like, "Oh yeah, I remember so and so, da da da," or one time he went to this like creek and was like yelling across the creek for somebody, and everyone was just like, what is he doing? And then it turned out it was like 4 generations ago someone had lived there by that name, and the grandson or something, the great grandson, was there. And so there's all these stories about, you know, like, okay, Neem Karoli Baba Hanuman was living other lifetimes as the same being for like 100, 200, 300, 400 years. Like nobody really knows. And then I was thinking about one time, there's this one quote where he was like, they think they're fooling me, but I'm fooling the whole world. And that popped back in, and I was like, what if this has been going on since the start of the Kali Yuga? That he's basically been like, he, you know, incarnation of Hanuman on Earth has just been going on. There's like all these like references that suggest that this has been going on for a long time, and it's like, this could easily be going back to the start of the Kali Yuga, because like literally that's what he said. He came at the start of the Kali Yuga. And so I was thinking about this, and there's a I got a copy of the Ramayana, and the interesting thing that I didn't know is I'm spacing on the other texts, but according to what I'm learning in my research, the Ramayana and this other book that's not the Christian Bible are the 2 most like widely spread, widely read books in humanity's history, is my understanding of it. And that Ramayana by you know, there's a lot of debate of like, when did the Ramayana like originally come in, but the Valmiki writing of the Ramayana is said to have been in, I think, the 700s BCE, which is literally right at the start of the Kali Yuga. And so it's the 5th chapter of the Ramayana that like details out all of like the ways that Hanuman served Ram. Anyway, so yeah, the Ramayana is, you know, it's huge. Hanuman's presence, Ram and Hanuman coming into consciousness in humanity and spreading through the Ramayana at the start of the Kali Yuga. Does that mean that Neem Karoli Baba was incarnating back then? It could be, like, you know, like these things we just don't know. But anyway, that was a correlation to resolve a conflict between the Sri Yukteswar Yuga cycle and something that Neem Karoli Baba said about coming during the Kali Yuga. And so now I think that part of him fooling the whole world is the fact that he's been incarnating for centuries and centuries, but it's been kept a secret. And yeah, there was no books, you know, really like during his lifetime, except I think the first one was the Be Here Now Ram Dass one, because he didn't let anybody, you know. And like, even like when he was alive, there was this thing about the, I don't know, like 50 or 100 greatest saints of India, and he wasn't even on the list. Like, he just was operating in a different way. Anyway, that's my little thing on that. Moving on back to a little more direct astrology, just to wrap things up today. Thinking about Neptune in Aries. In relationship to the South Node in Virgo, I think, you know, like that's that inconjunct, right? That Aries Virgo inconjunct. That alone, that inconjunct in astrology correlates to a crisis. And you know, Neptune. One of the things I've been thinking about with Neptune in Aries is inspired action. That's kind of like this ideal that we're now inspired in what we want to do. And we're doing it. Obviously, like Neptune went into Aries, and like immediately it's like, oh, and this country's bolstering their military, and what inspires people's action. But there's just so many beautiful inspired actions going on that you don't get when you just scan big news source headlines and stuff. But in relation to the Virgo South Node and this whole thing of reliving this emptiness, having within ourselves and having that come up, that's the idea. Is like the South Node is transiting Virgo, so it's like maybe it wasn't as big of a issue, and now it's like even more like in our consciousness of like, yeah, that thing that you're doing is an attempt to fill this emptiness. And then Neptune in Aries is like, what's your inspired action? And so this kind of creates this crises in then those relationship to those things. And obviously the north node of Neptune is in Pisces, so that emphasizes the north node, the lunar transiting lunar north node opposite Virgo is in Pisces. And so Neptune rules that Pisces north node, which emphasizes the Neptune in Aries even more. And so in EA, we kind of have this general, like, the ruler of the north node facilitates and kind of kickstarts the evolutionary process. So in this case, we're talking about Neptune in Aries. So basically what I would saying that I'm reading the astrology to mean is find your inspired action in life and go for that. And that can be a way to, shift this. Like, it's not like I kind of think of the emptiness and the inner wound. I thought about this when Chiron was transiting in Pisces before it went into Aries, right? And I realized it's the separation from source, from unconditional love, for us to forget that we can experience that level of love. Like, to me, that was like, that's the greatest pain and wound. Like, we just like, we want to go back to that sense of connectedness. And the therapist was basically like, yeah, she was saying like, this is because of patriarchy, this, and she's like, if we lived in community, how we did for many thousands of years in the past, we have all of these other personal needs met, which was really interesting because I just got to hang out with a 1.5-year-old, and I was so filled up with joy. They're just so beautiful. So I was kind of reminded of, and I got to do this event recently, and like some youth and kids were there painting, and just made me so happy to see that. And I kind of was like, oh yeah, here's this thing where you've got community, and there's this like way that we do get fed by it when it's in our lives. So yeah, I guess like my completing that thought, the South Node of Virgo to me, and this pain of the separation from source is how I see it, because it's like there's only emptiness in the Virgo archetype if the polarity Pisces is not integrated into it, which is unconditional love. And so like we're seeking this fulfillment that only like true love can give us. And so yeah, we can be aware that we still hold that, and then we can just still be like, okay, well, yeah, I've got, like, it's like for me with this South Node Chiron conjunction, it's like I'm aware that I have this deep wound, and there's times where it gets I don't know, like it's not like so prominent, or it's cared for, or it's like, oh, I read once about, it's like Chiron is just like the wound, he can heal, there's still like the scar to remind us. Yeah, and sometimes things are really just so deep, and so something comes back up and then reminds us that, oh yeah, at a core level I'm just avoiding this thing. And so yeah, I guess that finding our inspired action is the way out, is how I would see all that. And another thing to end with is, peaceful warrior is definitely a Neptune and Aries thing, of course, which I reminded of that when I drew the Chariot card in the Herbal Tarot, Michael Tierra. And did I have a couple more things? Let's see. Oh gosh, I did. I don't know if I'm going to go into them because this is, we're at 51 minutes. But yeah, in the Herbal Tarot, the Chariot's kind of like the Chariot's, like there's this need for focus. There's like, it's like life's happening, but to have the Chariot not go flying and lose control, there's kind of this like it's interesting because it's like the opposite of Aries is Libra, and there's this need for this inner Libra. There's this need for this inner peace, inner balance, and harmony. It's like when you're chopping wood and then you start like thinking about something else that like kind of gets your goat a little bit, and then you like miss the wood and it goes flying and you're like, but then you're like, okay, I'm going to return to focus on this, and I'm going to do this. And when we focus our will and are able to do that and remain with this equilibrium, we stay on course. And so that correlates to the path of the peaceful warrior as we move through life, which is a Neptune and Aries thing. All right, really quick. I had two other things. I'll just share them since if you listened this far, maybe you want to hear it. So otherwise you wouldn't be here. Shutting down. That's something I've been working on. I'm not working on shutting down. I'm working on not shutting down. And I've been thinking, so just sharing this in case it's inspiring to anybody, that, like when we're in relationship and somebody else, the other person brings something that's hard, like it's possible that one of the responses is that we emotionally shut down. And so I wanted to raise awareness to the fact that when somebody else brings something up that's challenging them in the relationship, that's an emotional work in and of itself to do that. Like that can take courage, like somebody to step forward and share something that's been bothering them, if they're doing it with, pure intention and not, it's, like, not to get into that, but, like that, it does take a certain emotional work. And so to emotionally shut down as a response, like that, like, how does that feel? Like if you're the one bringing something, you're like, okay, now what do I have, like, I don't want to like emotionally caretake you because you shut down, but like I just was the one that did this emotional work to even bring this up. And so I've been reflecting a lot on like, when do I shut down and why, and how do I interrupt this pattern? And two of the things that I've learned is like, one, talking about it, just talking about it in general, and to people that we're in relationship with, to raise more awareness that it is a pattern. And then that makes it easier to talk about the pattern, because even if you do start, and this is the other key, is like, even if you do start to shut down, you can acknowledge the fact that, wow, what you just said was, thank you for sharing that. I realize that I can feel myself shutting down a little bit. Like, I don't want to, but I'm not sure of when I'm going to be able to respond in a way that is healthy. So I'm just gonna like sit with what you shared, and get back to you when I can. It could be something like that, and it could just be by speaking that you're able to then keep going and work through, and not fall into all the other emotional responses. So yeah, I've been working on that, and kind of just kind of realizing, like, we like we want to change something about ourselves. Well, like, you can just ask for that. You can say, how do I change this thing about myself? And some people might say that's like you're setting your intention, you're saying it out loud. Like, that's a thing. You could be like, yeah, I'm just asking the universe. That's a thing too. You can say that. In my perspective, I call it, that's prayer to me, is like, whatever you might be asking these things of. It's it could be a parent that passed away that you're having a conversation with. Like, but by having that conversation, by energetically setting these intentions, we can shift and change things. And this is where this was my final point, was just like, there's this kind of there's this spiritual concept that I've been, or teaching that I've been reflecting on a lot, which is basically like, this idea, like, yeah, the world's imperfect. There's joy and there's suffering, but it is God's responsibility to tend to us. But then we have the responsibility of asking for what we need, for prayer and petition of what we need. So it's a really interesting concept. I don't think astrology necessarily has this as a, like, astrology is very like, it's a science. I mean, I see it as a science. It's like, it's a cosmic mirror, as above, so below. We're not pulling cards like, that planet is there, that planet is forming this aspect, or is in conjunction with this when you were born. Like, we know these things are happening. We bookend these time periods that we're going through things, but it's also like not fatalistic. And if there's this thing called grace, like God helps those who help themselves. It's kind of like, whatever you believe, if you are truly in need, and you're truly suffering, and you call out and ask for over and over again, like, that's the idea, is that part is our responsibility to participate. It's a little confusing, but because it's like, well, if God knows everything, and it's like, well, why like put us through this? Like, why does this world have so much suffering? And all the whys is why I got into evolutionary astrology. Basically because it's like, there's this bigger picture, metaphysical snapshot of understanding the evolution of humanity through smaller and larger cycles. But still, there's this why. Anyway, that's all for now. We're at an hour. Lots of love, and I hope you're well. Until next time.